Some inhabitants of the northwest and the southwest regions of the Republic of Cameroon, hit by socio-political and security crisis for close to 3 years, today are asking the question, what is the special status? Others are urging government to shift from words to concrete actions on the ground in view of solving the Anglophone crisis. They were speaking during meetings with peace crusaders sent to those two regions by the Prime Minister, Chief Dr. Joseph Diangote, within the framework of a peace and sensitization crusade, which he has put in place to hasten efforts to return to normalcy and peace in those two Anglophone regions of the country. We'll be taking a look at that in this edition of The Inside. We'll also be talking about the recommended framework for the special status for the northwest and southwest regions of the country. Stay with us. Thanks, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us on this edition of The Inside. I am Babli Jonathan. Our guest in this edition is Dr. NGWANYAM, a politician, one of the participants at the major national dialogue which took place in Yaoundé and which ended on some recommendations. And one of the major recommendations was the special status for the northwest and the southwest regions of the Republic of Cameroon. And close to 2 months after the major national dialogue, the head of state, President Paul Biya, was in France and announced during a peace forum in the French capital city that the attempt to assimilate the minority and English-speaking population of the country into the majority French-speaking part of the country failed over the years, and now has come the time to give the two regions the special status which is enshrined in the 1996 constitution of the country. And with regards to what he said, indicating that there are measures that are being taken for the implementation of the special status, the Prime Minister, Chief Dr. Joseph Diangote, has put in place peace and sensitization initiative and sent peace crusaders to the two Anglophone regions of the country. Dr. NGWANYAM, what do you think about this initiative?
I think whatever we do to get peace is welcome. Peace is one of those things that you cannot do without. And when you do have peace, I guess we tend to take it for granted until someone takes it away from us. And if you're going to spend a night with a mosquito in your blanket or in your room, that's when you know what it means to have peace. Because of course you wouldn't sleep, and the next day you'll be like a zombie. So we are saying that we don't have peace in our nation, and it's time for us to do whatever it takes to have peace return, because nothing works without peace.
And some inhabitants of the two Anglophone regions of the country, some Anglophones have been saying that this initiative undertaken by the Prime Minister is not the right thing to be done at this point in time. They think that is not going to solve any problem.
Well, the Prime Minister is just one individual, and probably he has some advisors, I don't know. But we are 25 million of us, and let's say that probably about 1 million or 2 million have the capacity to think and rule and propose solutions. And if you were to ask 1 million people what would they have done, we will have as many different answers as there are people. So what the Prime Minister has just done is only one of the ways of attacking the problem, but if you ask a couple more people, they would approach it differently.
And during the meetings organized by the Peace Crusaders in the two Anglophone regions, some participants said there is time has come for government to shift from words, from speeches, from sensitization to concrete actions on the ground that will solve this problem. What do you think about this point of view of some inhabitants, some Anglophones?
Well, I guess whoever said it is right, because I think one of our neighboring countries, I don't know whether it's the president who said sometime that si vous voulez le discours, allez au Cameroun, because we are just used to talking, and when you just talk, it's not much. You know, in solving a problem, number one, you identify the problems, then you try to understand the problem and its solutions. Then once you have understood the solutions, then you craft that into something that makes sense. Then once you have come to that point where you say, look, we have this problem and this is the solution, then you ask the next question, when should we do something about it? If you and I agree that we have a problem and we have to solve it, then you start solving it, immediately it dawns on you that that's what has to be done. So keeping in the drawer is not useful.
It's not useful. What should be done? What are some of the concrete actions that should be taken?
You know, probably because before we get lost into this thing, why don't we refresh our minds and come back and kind of like paint some pictures so that our listeners will be able to know in one context we are talking. Because, you know, let me talk about the Grand National Dialogue first. When the Grand National Dialogue was put in place by the president and probably the encouragement from the foreign bodies and everyone else who cares about peace, the idea they were looking for, they were looking for was that we do everything to have peace in Cameroon. That is the main objective. Do whatever it takes after that dialogue so that we get peace. And this is the thing. Cameroon as a nation, as we've said before, has got many problems, many problems. So on our fingertips, we would say that there's the Anglophone problem, which constitutes maybe 70% of the problems of the nation now, the Anglophone problem. You can then after that, once you have mentioned the Anglophone problem, you probably can talk about Boko Haram, youth problems, underdevelopment, poverty, corruption, and all of these. But what will take Cameroon down is the Anglophone problem, amongst other things. And that Anglophone problem, we needed to look at it and really solve it. And the Anglophone problem is not about bilingualism. It's not about bilingual teachers. It's not really about, you know, the judges in the court speaking French and so on. Those were just symptoms of a disease. That's not the disease. And therefore, when we try to provide symptomatic treatment, it doesn't work. The problem is, and the president said it, that the idea they had been trying to assimilate the Anglophones, and therefore they had put in all these bottlenecks and the traps for Anglophones, so to say, to hurt them. I mean, when I say hurt, it's like push them like cattle to become Francophones. That is, you get somebody who has a mindset of his own, a culture of his own, a people, a territory, and then you just capture them from over here and bring them over here and indoctrinate them so that they become something that they never were. That was what they were trying to do. And he said for 60 years it's not worked. So that is the problem. That is the problem we should be solving. So now, so the national dialogue, the Grand National Dialogue would have addressed that problem. But because the president had not brought this part of it to light, everyone else was running around in circles trying to solve a problem that they did not understand. That's the issue. You know, so whatever was put on the table for the Grand National Dialogue, it didn't really address the problem. The problem, the hidden agenda, was that assimilation. And therefore, whatever we were doing, we were beating around the bush and not facing the problem. So once the president says the Anglophones should no longer be assimilated, and you know that his word is law, then of course the paradigm changes. And therefore now we are now in a free world, and we are allowed to think freely. We are allowed to come up with solutions freely. We are allowed to do whatever we want, provided it brings us the peace. And number two, provided it solves the problems of the Anglophones while they are still part of the whole. And once you understand the problem as such, then it becomes very clear. So I'm saying that up until during the national dialogue and after the national dialogue, the thinking was like that. But after the president spoke, the thinking is like this, is more liberated, and now is the time for us to actually look at that Anglophone problem and begin to solve it. So again, looking back again into that Grand National Dialogue, 90% of the time and the effort and the work that was put in the Grand National Dialogue would have been to address the Anglophone problem. There were 8 commissions. I would say that 7 of the commissions were just distractions, real distractions.
Well, why were they distractions?
They were distractions because they took away the energy from focusing on what the problem is. The problem is not a problem of bilingualism. Yes, we have bilingual problems in Cameroon, but children did not take up guns and go to the bush because of bilingualism. We didn't. So go through all the problems in the. I mean, as far as those commissions are concerned, yes, there are problems, but that is not the main issue. When you want to build a house, you put pillars over here, a pillar there to do this, a pillar to do this. They were not pillar issues. The real pillar issue in the country was and remains the form of state,
which was not on the agenda.
Which was not on the agenda. So if we had come to that meeting saying, let us look at this thing and solve the problem of Cameroon, solve the problems of Anglophones and so on, we would have discussed the form of state. Even though some argue that the fact that decentralization was on the agenda was synonymous to the form of the state. That is right. It was given and packaged, so that you needed to be intelligent to know that that's what it was. It was packaged with a predetermined solution, answer, so to speak, and therefore, people were not allowed to express themselves very well and really deal with the issues there as they were. There was like, okay, you are going to discuss decentralization is a form of state, and this is the way you are going to think. You are not allowed to think out of this box. That is the problem. Until some persons who were in that commission on decentralization, like Barrister Agbo Bala and others, compel the participants to discuss issues on the form of the state after a heated debate. Yes, even before we started, something happened during that major national dialogue that was a little bit confusing. Because as participants, we went there as participants, during the registration, which was the day before the real thing started, there was a form that you had to fill. You put in your name, and you kind of like, there were those 8 commissions, and you had to indicate which commissions you were interested in. So people kind of like indicated. But at the end of the day, when we were dispatched into different commissions, you were sent off to some desert land that you are not part of. So you were lost at sea. Because I, for one, I wanted to go either into the decentralization commission, because I'm very passionate about confederation. We've talked about it a lot because that's a solution. And then I'm also very passionate about education, the kind of education. But I found myself in the diaspora commission, and honestly, I was lost all the time. So many people were like that. So when you mention someone like Barrister Agbo Felix Bala, I think he was thrown in some commission somewhere, and it was like, okay, during the deliberations, you can always move in between commissions and feel free and so on. But interestingly, the door to that commission was shut. Was it a deliberate intention to water down debates on the form? Nobody knows, but it is those little things that make people a little bit skeptical. Because you ask people to come and talk, they want to come and talk, you shut the door in their faces, and you put people in the hall who have nothing to do with it, and then things are just turned around. So people want to speak, people want to be heard, and then you need to really listen to others. Then one gets the impression that you don't really want others to speak, you don't want to listen to them, and so on. So at the end of the day, this negative energy continues, and that's why you see today, even after that, you have to dispatch commissions into the regions to go and talk about something that would have just been thrashed on the floor. And one of the recommendations that emerged from the national dialogue, the first which the head of state has decided to start implementing, concerns the
special recruitment of 500 translators in state institutions.
That is not a problem, and that is not a solution. This country has been for 56 years or whatever, and it's been a bilingual country, and if you go to the presidency, there are translators there. So it's not just something we woke up and we realized that we needed translators. And even if we do, that is not the solution people are looking for now. They want the solution to the real things. It's about that special status. It's about the form of state. Once we have solved that one, these ones are just icings on the cake. You know the cake. When your wife bakes a cake, or if you bakes a birthday cake, when she's done baking the cake, she takes this sweetener and puts on it and so on, makes it white and beautiful. You cannot bring the icing before the cake. You need the cake, then once you have the cake and people agree that the cake is well baked, then you put icing on it.
Dr. Nick, we are talking about what should be done in order to put an end to the killings, the destruction of properties, and villages being burnt down in the two Anglophone regions of the country. And the special status which you were talking about is one of the major recommendations of the national dialogue, which should be implemented as a way, or is expected to be implemented as a way out of the Anglophone crisis. And during the Peace Crusade launched by Prime Minister during some of the meetings in Kumba, in Limbe, in Bamenda, and so on, people were asking the question, what is it, this special status? What is the special status? What answer will you give them?
They have a right to ask that question, because everything hinges on it. Everything, it doesn't matter. Send 1,000 peace crusaders out there to go and talk. That is the thing. As long as no one can answer that question, what is the special status, the problem will not be solved. It's very, very, very important.
Professor Angwafo and other.
No, you can send. You can Professor. No, you can answer. You cannot answer a question to which if you don't have the answer, you don't have the answer. I mean, we could talk about a couple of things around it, but that foundational thing, if you don't give the answer to the foundational thing, you will not answer the question. It's good to have sent, I'm not saying that it's a bad thing to send people out there. Actually, I'm supposed to be in the province. I'm part of that team. But I didn't go for one thing because, again, there's a lot of kidnapping up there and you never know. And I ran away from there because of the kidnapping. So going back there when the kidnapping is still going and has not been stopped, it's a little bit dangerous and tricky. Now,
but those who are going there,
we are all different.
They may attack you.
Now I have a very I know that I have a very big mouth, and when you are kidnapped, this is the thing. You don't really know who is kidnapping who. If we knew exactly who is kidnapping who, sometimes you can know that, okay, that is the guy who kidnaps. He's over there, so I'd rather be over here. I'm actually on the team, but I had to pray about it very seriously because going to the region is not, or the regions is not just as easy as people think. While we left, I'm an IDP, and the reason I left and abandoned everything else was because of the security risks and the kidnappings and the killings and whatever. That's why I left with my family. It will be good now to go back there and see what we can do to bring peace to everybody. But I have to be very certain where I'm putting my foot, because as you know, there's a lot of kidnapping going on, and what I must say, the characteristics of those kidnappings is that you don't really know who is kidnapping who. You can't swear about it. If you swear about it, you're a fool. You can't swear who is kidnapping who, and you don't know where they are, and therefore it's very uncertain. And as long as you are away from that zone, at least you can close an eye. But while there, you cannot be very certain about your next meal. One has got to be very careful. And I think that's the only reason. I would have loved to be there, but if I didn't go there, number one is the security issue, and number two, I will not be able to answer a question on the special status if I were asked that question directly.
Why will you not answer? Now I'm asking you the question.
No,
what is it, the special status?
No, because
they need to know what.
Yeah, when you go, when you go to the region sent by the government, then it is assumed that the government has given you the answer to the question. But if you are going when the government has not given you the answer to the question, then you just beat around the bush. Because you see, even before we even get lost in this, you were making a comment, and something came into my mind. The special status is not something new to us in Cameroon. The special status was something that was set aside for Anglophones in 1996. It's in the Constitution. But it was put there in a small writing and then put in the law in the locker. So someone meant well for us, gave it with the right hand and took it back with the left and locked it up in the locker. So it is when Minister Akame Fumo, or was it, he said, no, but there is a clause in here, that's in the decentralization committee, something that can be done for Anglophones. It is within the context of the Constitution. Then everybody woke up, special status for Anglophones. But we've had the special status lying there, something that would have been implemented since 1996 and will not be where we are today. So you see, so when we still pull out this joker and say special status, everybody now starts scratching themselves and wondering, what exactly are you up to? And that's the question people are asking, to which there must be an answer. And therefore, when we come into the regions again and we are talking and the answer is not concrete, people are very skeptical. And usually, when you are that government mouthpiece or whatever, talking on behalf of the government, and truth is not coming out of your lips, it can be very tricky. That's why, of course, you would have noticed that up until now, for the past 3 years and how many years, the government of Mr. Philemon Yang, is you can say that it's completely different from the one of Prime Minister Dion Ngute. The government of Mr. Philemon Yang had its own modus operandi, in the sense that it doesn't matter what they did or were doing. What they would do is they will have meetings in Yaoundé amongst themselves as elites and talk to themselves. They would come to the regions and call a few delegates and talk to themselves, and they never really talked to the population. The population was kind of like abandoned over there. So they talked to themselves in Yaoundé and went to Bamenda and talked to themselves. And that's why this problem was ongoing and became so bad, because the elites were talking to themselves and there was a disconnect between government and the people. But you will see that the approach of Mr. Dion Ngute is a little bit different. He has more of a grassroots approach. And like when I was talking about the other prime minister, you would have noticed too that these elites, they had a mindset, that is, they will agree on what they want to talk about in Yaoundé, come and then say the same things in Bamenda to whoever cared to listen, and then whether the message sank or not, they would go away. And that's why the problems have been persisting. Now I would figure that probably Prime Minister Dion Ngute has realized that he has to change the people that he has to use on the field. That's why if you look at the names, I mean, there's still some old hands there, but you will see that the delegation to the southwest is led by Bishop Kea, and then the delegation to the northwest is led by His Eminence Christian Cardinal Tumi. So what is the difference in the two approaches? These are people who from God's house, they are God-fearing, and they have had, people have been listening to them over the years. So I think Prime Minister Dion Ngute wants to use different ingredients in cooking his own sauce.
All right, the special status, what is it?
The special status, now when you ask me the question about the special status, it's a question that I couldn't answer for about 2 weeks after the Grand National Dialogue. If you ask me what it was, I mean, I would just throw my hands in the air. I didn't know what it was until we started to Google search and read on the internet to try to get an understanding what exactly it is. And that's how we came to realize that there were some pockets around the world, like Quebec and Hong Kong and a couple of other places, that are existing under that special status phenomenon. Then when you dig deep, then you realize that the special status in itself is just a container and means nothing. And it only has meaning when you put in something. It is what you put in that gives it meaning. Otherwise, it's just a container. So you have you have a 20-liter container, you have a 10-liter container, you have that. What have you put inside? That is the thing. What is the Senegalese put inside when they were dealing with the Casamance? Catalonia, what did they put inside? In Quebec, what did they put inside? And then what you put inside is determined by your peculiar problems, because special status is not just, you don't just do it for the sake of doing it. It is the problems that you are facing and you cannot solve. Then you say, okay, I'm going to use this tool called special status, and then you lay it on the table, then you fill it with the building blocks that will allow you to solve the problems. So for us to solve the problems of the special status, we need to look at all the complaints that Anglophones have been having for the past 56 years. What have they been complaining about? How do we address the problems? And then you put in that bag what solves their problems. So then you would have solved the problems. You have used it special status, but you have adapted it to the Cameroonian context, and you have solved the problem.
And that's where we want to look at the recommended content, the recommended framework. You put it that way.
Correct.
But I will put it the recommended content of the special status. And one of
as defined by us
that you think, you and other Anglophones from the northwest and southwest regions of the country think that one of the things that should be put inside the special status container is the House of Assembly.
Yes. Before I get lost into that small detail, let me say this. The special status was crafted by a bunch of us, some of us in Cameroon and a lot more in the diaspora. And we worked on the internet and put it together. We read and then we pulled things together. But again, when we were pulling things together, what was the mind frame? Under what? You know, like when we went to the Grand National Dialogue, it was said that don't talk about anything. You are limited to the confines of the Constitution. You remember that? So what is it that was boxing us? You know, we were still boxed by the same mindset. And so we put in things. And then after the president makes his declaration in France, then I am of the opinion that whatever we put together covers only 60% of what should be in that box to be able to solve the Anglophone problems. And if we are going to now see how we truly solve the Anglophone problems and get them to be a free people in this union, then there's some 40% that we didn't put in that document that we've got to add to it to make it whole. I don't know if it's making some sense.
Right.
Yeah, we must look at it that way. So the special status has a part A plus part B. So in this document that we wrote, we dealt with the part A, but the part B is missing. After the president spoke, there's a part B to be added so that there's a whole and it can solve the problem. So when we are explaining this, understand that we are dealing with the part A, and if you ask me about the part B, I'll give you.
All right, in the part A, we are talking about the House of Assembly, the House of Chiefs, an elected governor. We are also talking about government official liaison officer
yeah,
in those two regions, and that is the two regions within the context of the special status. We are also talking about the judicial system, which should be put in place for those two regions in the context of the special status. We are also talking about revenue sharing between the government, the national government, and of course the regional administrations in those two regions. We are also talking about representation in the national government, the executive and the judiciary. We are also talking about the change of name of the country from the Republic of Cameroon to the United Republic of Cameroon. And we are also talking about higher institutions of learning. This is in the educational domain, schools like the National School of Administration and Magistracy, ENAM, the University Teaching Hospital, the QUS, Advanced School of Post and Telecommunications,
all these
International Relations Institute, and other higher institutions of learning that which you think that those who graduate from these schools should not be recruited directly in the special status regions, but there will be a coordination that will be done by a central administration of those two regions. And of course, you also talked about the special status commissions. in those two regions, the Commission of Inquiry on Matters of Governance, of investigation of senior government officials, Vehicle Inspection Authority. You also talked about a sanitary inspection unit. And of course, the last thing you talked about in this part A of the recommended framework of the special status is concerns the police, the gendarmes, and other uniform agents. And
you forgot the House of Chiefs.
Community.
The House of Chiefs. Did
the
you
House
mention
of Chiefs?
Yeah,
yes,
correct.
I
Yeah.
did. The
Okay.
House of Chiefs.
Okay.
And when you look at all of these, this is part A.
Yeah, part A.
How much of a problem can this solve?
You see,
How much of the problem
if
can
you have
this
done, there's a management tool called Pareto's rule. Pareto's rule is known as the 80-20 rule, or the 90 whatever. You know, what is Pareto's rule? I can say, for instance, that 80% of the population of Cameroon lives in 20% of all big cities and towns and villages. Would that be correct? 80% of the population in Cameroon lives in 20% of all the big cities, if at all we have cities, big cities, towns and villages. It is correct. I can say, for instance, that 95% of the wealth in the world belongs to 5% of the people. Is that correct?
That would be correct.
It's correct. That's Pareto's rule. And therefore, if you are aware of Pareto's rule, then you'll be able to solve a lot of problems. The question is, yes, Anglophones have a lot of problems. I've been complaining about many things. What is the one thing that I would do that will solve 80% of their problems? This is a concept, they are principles. If you don't understand them, you'll be beating around the bush and so on. That's why when you ask me whether recruiting 500 bilingual translators, it solves no problem, because I'm answering that question based on this principle that I'm giving you. There is the Anglophone problem. Let me reframe the question. What is that one single thing that we should do in Cameroon to solve 80% of the Anglophone problem? All right? So if you ask for that one thing, it doesn't exist in this part A. It exists in the part B. It's redefining that form of state and getting it right. Because in answering the question of part this thing, is under special status, but you know we are struggling with northwest, southwest, you know, all those things that. But to be able to understand it very well, remember again that Cameroon as a nation it came from two entities, and the president himself said it in France. There was this entity over here called West Cameroon, and this entity over here called East Cameroon that came together as a federal republic. That is the basis. The Federal Republic of equal states. Now, when you now begin to read, even on social media, people are asking questions. We who are fighting over here and complaining are Anglophones. We are supposed to be a state. And there are other people here in another state, the Francophone state. And it is you, the Francophone state, that want to give us a special status. Are you getting the way people are interpreting it? Under what makes you think that you can give us a special status when we are just as equal as you are? So we should rather be talking to each other as equals and seeing how best we can solve the problem. You see, that is the argument a lot of people are having. And that is what we should be looking at. What do we do exactly so that the problem gets solved? That is the part B of the problem. And that's where federation and confederation comes in.
Professor Willie Zingwa, for example, thinks that Anglophones have to define the spatial status. Spatial status should not be defined somewhere and handed over to Anglophones as a piece of bread.
It cannot. It is the Anglophones. Because it is the Anglophone that complains. It says, my shoe is pinching over here. Please solve it. Do it this way. You have the capacity, you know, to solve it. If you are saying you have a problem, a piece of gravel in your right shoe, for instance, someone can spend 100 years dealing with the left foot. The problem is not solved. So it is the Anglophone who knows where the problem is and who has to define the solutions that will sort it, that would help him. And therefore, that is the approach. If you take that approach where you listen to others, you respect others, and help them to express themselves and tell you where the shoe pinches, and then we all sit together and deal with it, the problem will be solved.
If the House of Assembly, the House of Chiefs, governors are elected, but there is something that you talked about, a liaison officer and so on. Is that not synonymous to the government delegates who are appointed by the President of the Republic?
Again, let's come back to it. That document, when we wrote the document, you see, there was going to be this special status over here. And the special status, in the special status, we are saying that there will be, a mini government for each region, okay? And that mini government is under the elected governor of that region, a governor for the Northwest and a governor for the Southwest. And then there will be a House of Assembly for the Northwest region and a House of Assembly for the Southwest region, a House of Chiefs for the Northwest region and a House of Chiefs for the Southwest region. You see this thing here? Then, because you're sitting over here, the government wants to actually keep an eye on what you are doing, making sure that you are staying within the limits and not going off track. And therefore, there is that government liaison officer who actually sounds like a thorn in the flesh. So, understanding the concept of that government officer, where is he, if you draw an organigram, where does he belong? And he must be watched very carefully, because, we've had a bad experience where we've had councils and councillors elected and they have their mayors, and the government delegate is taken and put over them who destroys all their work and doesn't allow them to do their work the way they see it fit. So that experience has been a very bad experience, and so people are asking, are you going to bring some other person again and superimpose on our governors so that they keep doing the Yaoundé biddings and not doing what we want? So that is the fear. But we were saying that government liaison officer, whoever he is and however he comes in, number one, in terms of rapport, the elected governor is here and he is just an element under here. Then in terms of the job description, the elected governor and his government are responsible for doing the work they did, for doing whatever it takes, to keep the people happy and developing. And that liaison officer has got no business into that kind of work. The liaison officer only looks at those things that deal with national issues, let's say the frontiers, the customs, the army, or something like that. But when it comes to running the
daily affairs,
the daily at the regions, he has no business in there, and he keeps his mouth shut and he locks himself in a room somewhere. And if that is not done, if we are going to talk and then at the end of the day somebody comes from Yaoundé and sits on us, then we would have just gone around in circles and nothing solved.
All right. If these things were to be given to the two Anglophone regions of the country, the House of Assembly, the House of Chiefs, governors elected, the revenues properly shared between the national government and the administrations in the Northwest and the Southwest regions of the country, how much of the problem, the Anglophone problem, not the crisis, the problem, will be solved?
Again, if you just gave us the package A, it will solve only 60% of the problems. It will not really solve all the problems. But if you now add the B package after the understanding that I explained to you, then even though it's called special status, everything in it will be defining a federation or a confederation, and that will solve a lot of problems. And all these other things that we mentioned, because when you say a federal state or a confederal state, then all these things we mentioned, we just determine them ourselves, because when we say a federal state, it's no longer Yaoundé that will be saying you people do this. No, we just do those things. You put in this one, put in this one. That works because you are a state on your own.
I'm asking that question because there's a section of Anglophones who think that there is no solution to the problem of Anglophones in Cameroon other than cessation, other than restoring the independence of the former Southern Cameroon.
Well, I think, because there have been problems, and we didn't address those problems very quickly and on time, people have over time, become radicalized.
They've moved to the
extremes, because it is the hope that keeps people thinking in a logical way. Or I'm not saying that people are not thinking logically, but when the resistance grows up, then the resistance comes from that end, and then things, as the polarization becomes more intense, then you can begin to see that more and more people are drifting away from that gentlemanly agreement because of the resistance on both sides. If government had given in and looked at the problem very quickly and tried to solve it in a gentlemanly way, we will not be where we are today.
All right, we'll take a look at what the newspapers reported this week, and we'll be right back in some few minutes.
Monday, November 18, 2019, on the Post newspaper, Bishop demands resignation of fugitive mayors, senators and members of parliament on post-major national dialogue caravan. Eden said Archbishop Fontem Ezwa and others raised points of order during the Christian Cardinal Tumi-led government peace caravan to the Northwest region. The Horizon said government sent peace caravan to the Northwest and Southwest regions. The media said Paul Biya dispatches peace caravan to Ground Zero as military option proves futile. The voice came back to the Biya Paris Peace Summit of all storms, highlighting scary admission of assimilation plot. The staff focused on the security demands of the opposition in Cameroon ahead of the February 9, 2020 elections. On same issue, the Watchdog Tribune presented Minister Paula Tanganji, CEMAC Commissioner Shejuns Yembe, Minister Fu Callistus Gentry and Minister Felix Mbayu as the Northwest CPTM elite that Mr. Biya can count on for victory. The Guardian Post said major national dialogue swallowed Christian Cardinal Tumi, Dr. Simon Munzu and Elise Mead. On the major national dialogue peace caravan, the paper said Ngala Gerard embarks on a peace sensitization tour in Donga Mantung Division. Cameroon Insider announced the opening of the CEMAC summit in Yaoundé.
Up next, interviews of the week.
In Kumbo, 400 people have been killed in the diocese of Kumbo. The Bishop of Kumbo and his priests and some lay have made a study. And the majority of those who have been killed have not been killed by these boys because they do not have the sophisticated arms that the army has. Maybe if they had, they would have killed more, but they don't have the possibility of killing more. Okay. The army comes in, a rebel boy has killed maybe one military man, he runs away, they enter a family and they mow down everybody.
Is that true?
It is perfectly true.
What? Okay.
I'm ready to die for it. My message to them is that they should lay down their arms for love of their brothers and sisters. These boys in the bushes are the cause of schools falling down. Their brothers and sisters are not going to school because of them. I know a girl whose hand was cut because she was going to take the General Certificate of Education examination.
The North has its problems with extremism, but the problem in the Anglophone area, and I know the Cameroon government does not like to use the word Anglophone because they say we have 120 languages. It's true, but there were two colonial histories of the two Cameroons that came together. So there has to be a true dialogue. There has to be also devolution of power to the region. Now, allegedly, the government of Cameroon has said that there will be, but the proof is always in the implementation. So that has to be put out there as real as is it federalism? Is it a type of decentralization? Something so that the people who are still moderates can gravitate towards that. Because, sir, for the third year in a row now, the Cameroonian children in the Southwest and the Northwest are not going to school for practical purposes. So are we going to have a whole lost generation of Cameroonians? Phenomenally sharp country, should be easily middle income and forward. So I wish I could give you better news.
Today, it will be practically impossible to rally and move delegates from one or from all the corners of Donga Mountain Division and the Northwest region to converge in the designated premises and vote in our primaries. Given also that many of my local SDF party officials have been either lost their lives, been framed and arrested, lost their family members, seen their homes and property burned down, or have been displaced by the war, whereas many other of my constituents, regardless of their political affiliation, are on the run for survival. After a deep and thoughtful reflection of the above with my God, my conscience, and my family, and given the current circumstances in the Northwest region, I, Honorable Dr. Awudumbaya Sepin, Member of Parliament for Donga Mountain Central Constituency and Questor at the National Assembly of Cameroon, do hereby declare that I shall not seek re-election into Parliament in the legislative election slated for 9th of February 2020. Given that I have decided to put your safety, the safety of all my constituents first, before or above my personal political ambition of staying in Parliament, I must not go back to Parliament under the current circumstances, working on the blood and in disrespect of all my constituents who have lost their lives in this civil war, be there the military, be there the civilian, be there the ambush. All these people are the children of this nation.
To ensure the socio-economic development by harnessing and uniting all the living positive forces of the subdivision towards this goal. To ensure the proper functioning, coordination, supervision, control, and continuity of all services. In this connection, public, para-public, and private services will have to go functional immediately. Mr. Dio, they have to go functional immediately.
I've tested the burden of being a moderator for 5 years, and if the entire church, through the pastors and delegates to the synod, have given me that mandate again, I just pray that God will not abandon me on this journey of my second mandate, but that God Himself will endow me with the strength I need. He will grant me the wisdom I need, and you are accompanying me on this journey so that we'll continue to grow and expand His church and make this church stand tall in Cameroon and beyond. Continuous transformation to move on with the activities that we did not complete in the past 5 years, and to see how we can continue to mobilize our resources to grow the church by transforming the entire PCC.
I'm sure by the grace of God we will serve the church. The synod itself is a synod of peace and unity. I think I am convinced that I am a man of peace. I like unity myself. As I said in the statement of faith, we must respect the hierarchy. The moderator is the vision bearer of the church, and I think that I am very ready to follow in that vision.
Thanks, ladies and gentlemen, for staying with us. Dr. Nick NGWANYAM, what would be your last word to Cameroonians? First, to the pro-independence fighters who are in the bushes, to Anglophones in general, and to the nation.
Well, our problems in Cameroon stem from the fact that we have bad governance. We have bad governance, and when you have bad governance, nothing works. And then on top of the bad governance, there was corruption. And then, you know, we have a lot of elites who gravitate in Yaoundé and been deceiving the president and telling the president the wrong things. And so we've been having wrong decisions that have made a bad situation worse. And so for the president realized after 56 years that whatever they've been putting together as a package to make Anglophones to become Francophones doesn't work. And now we are in a new season where Anglophones will be allowed in their own sphere to think and be who they are and do what they want to do, as long as it's not cessation. I guess that's what he was saying. As long, of course, if we are saying Cameroon, then we are saying as long as we are one, but they'll be allowed, you know, to be themselves. I think that is the real take-home message, that the president should hurry up and allow us to just be, and there will be a lot of peace.
All right, and to the pro-independence fighters, what will you tell them?
Well, when the pro-independence fighters begin to see that this thing is being done for real, and when we begin to do most of the things to correct the economic difficulties, the lack of jobs, the underdevelopment, putting in place those abandoned projects like the Tico Seaport and all those things that were abandoned, then they will now see that this is for real, and then they might begin to think and say, okay, let's give it a chance. But as long as we are only talking and nothing happening concretely on the ground, we are going nowhere.
Thank you, Dr. Nick NGWANYAM. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Thanks, ladies and gentlemen, for staying with us. That's it for this edition of The Insight.